a look at the use of the text tool. And this is to prep you for your branding assignment. Part of the branding assignment will be creating a logo. And remember, logo comes from the Greek word logos, which means word. It's the named portion of the branding for a company. So Nike, for instance, is the word Nike. And that would constitute the logo. Of course, it's contingent on having the correct font applied to it, but that's what we consider a logo. Now, in order to create this, we use the normal text tool, or type tool. That's the first one in this suite of pen tool options here. Now, you'll notice that whenever you see a small triangle in the bottom right of a menu option in your toolbox, if you click on that, it pops out, and if you click on this vertical bar, it will detach, just so that it's at the ready. So with the type tool, you click down, and it generates what designers would call Greeking type. Now, it's odd that it's called Greeking type simply because this is Latin, and we also know it by the term lorem ipsum, because those are the first two Latin words that are used in what we call placeholder text. Also Greeking text, lorem ipsum text. Why do we have it? Well, oftentimes designers are busy designing the look and feel of print materials and websites and apps before the copywriters have even established what the copy is going to be. It just allows us to develop, asynchronously and non-linearly. It allows us to develop visual assets without waiting for everything in turn. So this is our placeholder text, and you'll notice as I start to type, it appears there. And point type, as I've named it here, continues as I type. And it is created by clicking down with the type tool. Okay, just going to zoom out on that. And you can see that it just keeps generating one big long continuous line of type. So we call that point type. And the way in which we establish it is the way in which I've indicated here. We simply click down with that tool. Let's try it again. T gives you your type tool on your keyboard. And you click down and you start writing, just like that. Now, if you go to your selection tool, you can do that just by toggling using the command or the control key on a PC. You can see that it shows you what's called the bounding box. Let's just zoom in there for a little bit. That's the bounding box. You can take point type and you can scale it up. Now remember, when scaling type, scale it proportionately. Why? Because the type designer spent an awful lot of time and effort designing the size, the width, the stroke width relationships, the X height relationships, the ascender and descender heights, and even the space between pairs of letters have all been carefully considered and baked into a font in what is called its font design and also its font metrics, a series of numeric tables that determine spacing. So there we have point type. Now the nice thing about point type is it's scalable. And you'll notice it's indicated by this little handle here with the circle. And if I roll over it, it's indicating that, with this little arrow, that if I were to double click on this, that it would convert it to another kind of type called area type. So you can take one kind of type and convert it to another. But before we do that, let's actually take a look at what area type is and how we establish it. So area type is established by dragging. Instead of just clicking down, you drag, and this process of dragging defines a two-dimensional container for the type. Think of the type being like fluid and like water, and it's being distributed into a container. And you can see right there that it fills the container with that placeholder text, which of course at any time you can start to replace it. And this is called area type is created, and notice that as I'm typing, it forces the line to the next line. We basically call that a soft return. So area type is created by dragging instead of clicking, by dragging the type tool to create a text box. That's what we'll call it. Now what you'll notice here, so if I hold down my command key or control key on a PC, again we see the area indicated here, and we'll also notice the little handle here, it's solid as opposed to hollow. If we just zoom in there for a second and we roll over that, you'll notice that, sorry, I just want to roll in there for a sec. You'll notice as I roll over that, the icon that appears below my selection tool icon is a little arrow indicating that it's going to create a line of type, meaning if I double click on this, it will convert my area type into point type. Now, if we look at this bounding box, that's this area here, and we go to scale it just like we scaled point type, let's scale it up and look what happens. The type size does not change, only the container size changes. Let's contrast that with scaling up point type. And I'm holding the shift key down while I'm doing that. Again, I don't really need to hold the shift key down here. If I do so, it's keeping the original rectangle in proportion. Otherwise, I can make it any size I want. But here's what's interesting. If I make this smaller, we see a small red square with a plus sign appear inside it. And what that is, it's an overflow indicator, meaning that the size of this container is too small for the volume of type that we have generated, and therefore we're in an overflow situation. It's kind of a warning bell saying, look, there is type which is unaccounted for at this moment. So we can do one of two things. Well, we can do one of three things actually. I can make the box large enough to accommodate the volume of type, in which case that red overflow indicator disappears. So that's one strategy. The other strategy is to use your selection tool and click on that, and I'm releasing the command or control key, and you can see this icon. That's a loaded text icon, meaning we have control over whatever text remains undisplayed. So if I start to drag this, you'll notice it generated a second box and it filled the missing text in that box, starting from the top and moving down. And you'll notice it shows this little link. These things are linked in a chain. And let's just assume we want more text in there, and we can fill this up just by going to type and just say fill with placeholder text, and it fills those two boxes up, and it's filling it up with that placeholder text, the lorem ipsum. So here you see it again. If I make this smaller, I can pick this up here, click on it, and I have another text box. And you'll notice that if I make this box smaller, so we have 1, 2, 3 text boxes in that order. And notice if I take the first text box, I'm just going to hide the word dragging. You notice it gets pushed to the top of the second box. And the type that was in the second box already got pushed down into the third box. And if that was enough, like let's just make this much larger now, you notice that it's sucking text up from the text box below it in the chain. So there's this chain connection between text boxes. If I simply delete this text box, the chain remains unbroken. Only this link is removed. The chain is reestablished between the existing text boxes, just like this. So, again, I'll delete that. We're back to one text box. And if I stretch this up, I've accommodated all of the text. Now let's convert it from area type to point type. So I double click on that. It has now converted it. You'll notice it's hollow now. And if I start to scale up the bounding box around that, it's actually scaling the type. Why? Because it's point type now. Let's go the other way. And in this case, I'll double click. Notice that this is now solid. And so you'll notice if I make that smaller, it just hides the type. And as you can see, making it larger is not scaling the type. We're just scaling the dimensions of the type container or text box. And again, we could fill that with placeholder text from our type menu. Fill with placeholder text. And likewise, we'll just do that again. Type, fill with placeholder text. So that's point type and area type and how one converts back and forth between them.